I'd like to call to order the April 9th, 2024 regular monthly meeting of the Board of Directors of South Travel Water and Sewer Authority. I want to thank everyone for being here tonight. We always appreciate input from the public. As I stated earlier before we started the meeting, we have two sign-up sheets, one for public comments, the other one for comments during the public hearing on the budget. If anyone would like to sign up for one or both, you're welcome to, and we will appreciate any comments. And with that, we'll go to our roll call, Madam Secretary.
Commissioner Lang.
Present.
Councilperson Daniels.
Present.
Mayor Jordan is absent. Commissioner Gooch.
Present.
Commissioner Karen.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Kaczynski.
Present.
Commissioner McGowan.
Present.
All are accounted for.
All right. And with that, if you will, Commissioner McLam has our invocation tonight. Will you please join him in prayer?
Let us pray. Lord, be with us and guide us and direct us as we do SGWASA's business this evening. All this we ask in your son, Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
And if you will, please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Are there any adjustments to the agenda? If not, we'll call for approval of the agenda. Does anyone have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the agenda as is.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
Any discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carries. Review and approval of minutes from the March 12th, 24 board meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes from our March 12th meeting?
Yes.
Any questions or comments?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion on the motion? If not, we'll go to the vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it, motion carried. Our public comments. Do we have someone sign up for public comments or mail in public comments?
I'm not receiving.
Okay. All right, and then we'll go to board discussion items. And prior to each month's regularly scheduled board meeting, the board secretary surveys the South Travel Water and Sewer Authority board members to see if they have any discussion topics for the upcoming board meetings. The following are the responses received for discussion items for this board meeting. And we have Mayor Pro Tem Georgiana Kaczynski, our vice chair, has a couple of items, the leak adjustment policy and updating the SGWASA water rules and design standards to include auto flushing devices.
So I wanted to, thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to go over the forms that SGWASA has for request for leak adjustment. I've received some citizen phone calls lately. People are asking about what the process is and what we can do to help with those leak adjustments. And the answer to that is there is a leak adjustment form, and I believe, Crystal, it's on our website.
It is.
It's available on our website. If you have a leak and you've received a notice from SGWASA that your water, that there appears to be a leak and you've checked it, you can always, after you fix it, follow the directions that are on this form and go forward. Mr. Executive Director, anything you want to add to that?
No, that is correct. And I've also pointed out for the board this evening, it's a supplementary document, just a section of our water rules. Section 18, complaints and adjustments, and you'll see on page 11 of your agenda, 18E, in the event of a water leak on the customer side of the meter, there's some additional information there as well, just to support the form that you talked about, as well as the leak adjustment. And that's how those two documents basically work together.
Right. And I know that we had one person who had a leak, and they were notified on Friday that there was a leak, and there was no business office open until Monday, and I explained to them there's nothing we could do about that. And it would all be taken into consideration, once they filed the correct paperwork.
Correct.
Scott, when you want to jump in on the auto flushers, you know more about it than I do. I know I asked for it a couple of years ago, and I was wondering where we are.
Well, I sure will. So this is the second item that was under your discussion item, talking about updating SGWASA water rules and design standards to include auto flushing devices for dead and or AKA non-looped water mains. And I've attached for the board this evening some supporting documentation on, let's see, page 14 of your document. So SGWASA's water specifications were last updated in 2017. And considering, if you take into consideration the changes of materials and technology and updated design standards since the last update, SGWASA staff created a project and associated funding to occur in the proposed FY 24-25 budget. And the project will review and update SGWASA's water and sewer specifications and design. So I just want to mention that in the onset here to let you know that it's time to go through an update basically for us. Part of the project will incorporate new water quality standards related to increasing looped water mains and reducing dead end water mains. So that's really kind of the key sentence right there. So a dead end water main, for example, when you have a cul-de-sac street, a lot of times the water main goes to the end of the cul-de-sac. It is not looped. It's what we call a dead end. Sometimes if you don't have enough customers on that loop or on that dead end line, it can cause some problems with the water quality in that area. So we start looking at the installation of automatic flushing devices. And an automatic flushing device is basically a device that would go on an existing fire hydrant at the end of the cul-de-sac. It has a timer on it, and we can actually dial in the time of day and the duration of that. And it basically pulls water through that water main to keep water quality fresh throughout that water main on that street. We also have the ability to measure parameters as far as water quality at the same time coming from that same device. So if you would picture a cul-de-sac street and a hydrant at the end, which is very typical for fire protection, we would have a device at the end of that street that would automatically flow water. Now, these devices can actually be timed to occur after hours, so they don't disrupt our public during the daytime, but possibly run 10 o'clock till 2 a.m., different frequencies, those type of things. So they're great devices to have installed, and we will take a look at that, and also setting up water quality standards in case we do have dead end water mains, which we're going to try to eliminate as best we can. This is also important to have during multi-phase construction. So if you have more than one phase of construction going in, sometimes you have looped water lines, but you still don't have the water quality that you would like on your initial phase. So we're looking at also installing or requiring some of these devices during those phases as well, just to ensure that we have good water quality circulating in those phases as the other phases are being built. Sometimes the additional phases will actually take into account looping at the end of the last phase. So you eventually have that loop, but on the intermediate terms, you don't have that. So we'll be looking forward to that and incorporating that into one of our sections, water design section. I've given you an example of our standards where that would reside. So we've got some work to do on that this year in the next fiscal year. I think it's a great project. It was something that we wanted to do last year. We just didn't have the staffing capability to initiate that project, but we will this year. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have regarding that.
So the auto flushers, are they going to flush the water out like the hydrants do now, or does it flush it through the system to just move it along?
Well, it's a very good question. So once again, if you think about the cul-de-sac street and the hydrant at the end of the street, basically what it does is we use one of the nozzles and we actually attach this device to one of those nozzles. So it's pulling water through that entire line to the end of it to ensure that we have a fresh water supply moving through that line to the end of the cul-de-sac. And I think you can understand the importance of that, especially when you have your initial building on the street. You may not have houses all along the street that are pulling water from that main to keep it fresh. You may have one house at the end of the cul-de-sac. So this would help that as well, with that quality. But that's how the device basically attaches to an existing hydrant.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, anything else? If not, we'll move on to item 9, our proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget and our executive director's message.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just prior to reviewing the proposed FY 24-25 budget, I would like to thank the members of the SGWASA Finance Committee, Butner Mayor Linda Borden, Mayor Pro Tem Georgiana Kaczynski, Vice Chair, and Commissioner Jimmy Pooch, Chair. Thank you for your participation in the Finance Committee and the meetings that we held. I would also like to thank SGWASA's team members who helped me develop the draft budget. That would be Richard Ballmer, our Finance Director and Board Treasurer, Ruben Carden, our Assistant Finance Director, Priscilla Adcock, the HR Manager, Crystal Lee, the PIO Board Secretary, and our superintendents, Robert Jackson, Cody Norwood, and Jonathan Yancey. Tonight's meeting agenda is filled with information relative to the discussions and the output of the 2 Finance Committee meetings held earlier this year, one on February 28th and one on March 21st. Both meetings were open to the public, and then recorded meetings are available on our website. At the March 21st Finance Committee meeting, the committee provided staff with direction on preparing the draft budget that you will be reviewing this evening. The goals for tonight's proposed FY 24-25 budget are twofold. 1, to provide the Board of Directors with information regarding the proposed budget so that you can make informed decisions and recommendations, and 2, to conduct the required proposed FY 24-25 budget public hearing. The public hearing is scheduled for later in tonight's meeting agenda. At the conclusion of tonight's proposed budget discussion, staff would like to have clear direction from the Board of Directors on any modifications to the proposed budget. Based on the proposed budget modifications, staff can meet again with the Finance Committee to further review the discussion, or staff can prepare a revised budget and present it to the Board of Directors at their May 14th board meeting. The Board of Directors will have several opportunities to approve the FY 24-25 budget before July 1st, 2024, which is the start of the new fiscal year. The first opportunity will be at the regularly scheduled May 14th board meeting, followed by the regularly scheduled June 11th board meeting. If the FY 24-25 budget is not approved at the regular scheduled board meetings, then special meetings must occur prior to July 1st, 2024. You will see on tonight's meeting agenda, items 9 and 10 relate to the proposed FY 24-25 budget. These items include proposed fiscal year 24-25 budget review, executive director's message, and the SGWASA FY 21 strategic plan. And then item 10 is basically a review of the proposed FY 24-25 budget. As you're reviewing item 10 in your agenda this evening, you can see that there's many attachments. Those attachments are provided to the board this evening for discussion purposes. Should you have questions regarding any of the budget documents, rate review charts, so on and so forth. Richard Ballmer, our Finance Director, and I will be presenting these items this evening. Mr. Chair, prior to starting item 9, are there any questions or comments that you or the board may have?
Mayor Jordan, as Chair of the Finance Committee, you have any comments you'd like to make?
I just want to thank our Director Scott and the staff for all their hard work into creating the draft for us and attending the meetings to make sure that we were on track with making sure that we had what some of the requirements were, as well as expectations to make sure that we can do the things we need to keep SGWASA up and running and to meet all those expectations. So I just want to personally thank everyone for their hard work and dedication to make this possible so that we could be here this evening. Regarding what's presented, I don't have any questions or concerns regarding the budget that's been presented.
Okay, anyone else have any questions or concerns at this point? Okay, then we'll move on.
All right, may I move on to item 9, proposed fiscal year budget, the Executive
Yes.
Director's message. Thank you. So the proposed budget for fiscal year 24-25 is balanced, provides sufficient funds to meet the debt obligations of the organization, and provides for the annual operations of the utility systems. Proposed FY 24-25 budget does not include the use of fund balance to offset the increased operating costs associated to the proposed budget. To meet the debt obligations and the increased operational costs of the organization, the proposed budget includes a rate increase applied to all base rates and volume rates. Just as a reminder, on July 1st, 2023, the start of fiscal year 23-24, SGWASA implemented a new rate model. Prior to implementation of the new rate model, SGWASA increased rates on July 1st, 2021, basically the beginning of the fiscal year 21-22. The proposed rate increase is necessary to offset the inflation-based operating costs SGWASA has experienced during the past few years. During the past few years, SGWASA managed to absorb the costs associated to inflation due to a variety of factors. One major contributing factor to absorbing the inflationary costs included using the available fund balance from vacant jobs. Example, the 2 professional engineers on staff. Overall, with respect to staffing, the proposed budget includes a request for 2 new entry-level utility operator positions. Of these 2 new positions, 1 operator will be added to SGWASA's wastewater treatment facility, and 1 operator will be added to the wastewater treatment facility. The water and wastewater facilities will be able to utilize the position on various shifts. Again, we operate 24/7, 365, 3 shifts per day. Adding the 2 positions helps SGWASA gain on the much needed staffing of the utility. However, it still falls short of the additional resources needed across the organization. The need for additional resources has been documented for several years now. For example, 9 positions were requested by SGWASA's utility operations superintendents in fiscal years 21, 22, 23, and 24. To date, none of the additional requested positions have been funded or approved. In summary, although additional utility operators are needed, SGWASA's revenues have not been sufficient to fund the needed resources. Within the next 10 years, this trend may change when additional revenues are realized from residential commercial growth following the completion of the I-85 sanitary sewer improvement project. Some of the key elements, revenue elements of the proposed budget include a rate increase that projects water revenue to increase by $600,000 compared to FY 23-24. The rate increase projects sewer revenue to increase by $550,000 compared to FY 23-24. Proposed rate increase projects capital revenue at $2.4 million to fund infrastructure asset depreciation at 95%, which is an increase over the current 90%. The near-term goal, 5 years, is to increase this value to 100%. Fee categories included in the FY 24-25 rates, fees, and charges schedule were reviewed, expanded, and updated as necessary to reflect the actual cost of service. Some of the key payroll and benefits expense elements in the proposed budget include, as mentioned previously, adding 2 new positions, modifying 1 existing position, that would be the engineering director, to an assistant executive director, a 3% wage schedule adjustment, a 4% max performance merit increase for employees, the North Carolina state requirement increase of 0.75% for local government employees retirement system, projected increases of 15% to medical premiums and 5% to dental and vision premiums. The SGWASA matching contribution for the 401k program increases to 3%, and a medical insurance out-of-pocket cap of $500 per month per employee for out-of-pocket costs. Key expenses and capital outlay in the proposed FY 24-25 budget. Sizable increases in supplies costs, fuel costs, and chemical costs due to inflationary factors. Electricity costs due to provider rate increases. Professional services for general legal and engineering services. A projected 12% increase in property and liability insurance premiums. We have replacing or purchasing operating equipment totaling just over $202,000. And again, mentioning that the key expenses for capital outlay include $2.4 million for depreciation expense funded at 95%. Lastly, some of the key programs in the proposed FY 24-25 budget. Continued focus on mitigating the PFAS problems with the drinking water. This includes performing the needed chemical water analysis bench testing to determine which PFAS removal techniques will be used for the water treatment plant upgrade project. SGWASA recently received $500,000 grant from NCDEQ to perform this work. This work will start in June 2024. A continued focus on the I-85 sanitary sewer improvement project. The goal this fiscal year is to get this project under construction. As a note, SGWASA received a $35 million ARPA grant and was just recently awarded a $35 million low-interest loan from the USDA. SGWASA will also be contributing funding to this project as well. We will have a continued focus on the lead and copper service line identification plan and removal process. We will have continued upgrades across the service area with respect to capital improvement projects at both facilities, wastewater and water treatment, and also within our distribution system improvements. We're promoting the implementation in our budget of a new financial software. The new financial software will provide enhancements to customers and to the business operations of staff at SGWASA. And a new project entering an agreement with Spectrum to provide high-speed internet connectivity via fiber optic lines to all SGWASA facilities. This enhanced service will provide a virtual private network between facilities, something that we don't have currently, greater file share and business continuity, and a faster network for business applications. This technology upgrade, along with the new financial software, will allow SGWASA to operate in a truly modern business environment. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And now we've had the executive director's message, and now how this plays into our strategic plan.
Thank you very much. So in your agenda, you will find starting on page 18, a copy of the strategic plan for 2021 through 2026. This was adopted by the board on September 15th, 2021. The purpose of bringing this strategic plan forward to you is to basically show you that there is alignment between the strategic plan goals and objectives and our budgets. There's a lot of information here. I just thought it was a good time to present this to the board and to the public to have this in front of you. One of the things that I would like to focus on with our strategic plan is specifically is on page 22 of your agenda, page 4 of the strategic plan, with reference to the strategic plan review cycle. The minimum strategic plan review cycle suggested for SGWASA is annually. Furthermore, the strategic plan review period should be well in advance of next year's fiscal budget preparation, which normally starts in December and January. Based on these controls, a suggested annual strategic review date would be in October, thus providing the board and the administration the ability to incorporate any cost-related initiatives related to the strategic plan in the next fiscal year budget. I wanted to bring this to the board's attention because I talked to the chair about possibly having an October 2024 strategic plan review session with the board, and basically, again, to understand better the board's initiatives as we prepare for the upcoming fiscal year. That's all I have to say right now, Mr. Chair, regarding the strategic plan, although I'd be happy to talk about anything further as far as the goals on here. And my intent would be in October at our review to provide the board with an update on everything that we've done related to the strategic plan. I think that you'll recall that in pretty much every document that we present to the board at our board meetings has a link to the strategic plan as far as the goals and objectives. So just because I can't provide you with a lengthy list today of everything we've done related to this, you'll have one in the future. But know when you review all the documents that we present to the board, you can see that alignment, and that alignment is very important so that you understand how we're aligned with our strategic plan to be successful.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anybody have any questions, comments?
I think it's a great idea to do it in October. We didn't do it in this past year, and we don't want to let it get too far out before we review it again. So yes, I like Scott's suggestion on that.
And now we'll get to the meat of our meeting tonight, our proposed budget.
Very good. Thank you. At this time, moving on to item 10A, our proposed FY 24-25 budget, I would ask Richard Ballmer, our finance director, to join us at the podium as well, just so that he and I can participate in answering any questions the board may have. So the first item we have on page 33 of your agenda is the proposed ordinance. So I would ask Richard at this time, Richard, would you like to hit some of the highlights here of our proposed ordinance for the fiscal year 24-25?
Sure. So some of the highlights of the budget, as mentioned in the executive summary, the water revenues you'll see are 6.3 million. Wastewater revenue is 9,350,000. Most of the other things are pretty standard, and the expenses are outlined below. And you'll see that it is a balanced budget with no fund balance use at this time. And as Scott mentioned in the executive summary, depreciation for capital improvement funding is being set at a 95% level, and last year was at a 90%. And we'll have a public hearing, a reading of the entire ordinance into the record I'll entertain any questions you may have on the ordinance itself at this point.
Okay, anyone? Then we move on to the next item.
Okay, the next item would be 10B, the rate review chart. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
Yes,
So these are the proposed rates, combined water and sewer. We provided a comparison table on page 41 of the agenda with residential bill comparisons. So Richard, if you will, just describe for us the table that we're looking at, the proposed rates, and what we have on the top section of the table and the bottom section of the table, please.
Sure, the top section of the table gives you a comparison of current rates as they exist now, and the proposed rates that are built into the rate schedule that's upcoming and into the budget itself. And you'll see that, of course, you recall that our rate model is based on meter size. So for each meter size, you'll have the first column will be water, then sewer, and then a combined base charge. And you'll see that on both sides for the current and the proposed. Below that section for meter size, you'll see the volume charges. Volume charges for residential in the new rate model for last year are tiered. First 0 gallons through 4,000 gallons are at one rate. Residential above 4,000 gallons of usage in a billing cycle is at a higher rate. And then, of course, non-residential are consistent across the board.
yeah, Richard, just for clarification, your meter size, 3/4 residential.
That's typically a residential, that's correct. You do have some commercials for 3/4 as well, but I think all of our residentials. Okay.
I just want to make that clear for everyone. Thank you.
In the bottom section of the chart, what we did, because it's much more difficult with tiered volume rates to see how that translates into a customer's bill. We created a chart of 0 gallon usage all the way up to 10,000 gallon usage in 1,000 increments. And you'll see what the current rates and bill for that person would be and the proposed rate, so that you can see the change in a typical bill using those exact gallons.
And again, for kind of clarification, these gallons are measured by the meter in front of everyone's house or business, and it measures the volume that goes through that meter. And that's where your gallon charge comes from.
That's correct. That's what the volume charges are based off of. And of course, they're not in nice, neat increments of 1,000. We build to the gallon.
Okay,
So most customers are not going to follow exactly on one of these lines, of course, but it gives you some idea of kind of segments of our mainly residential customers. When you get into the commercials and institutional, of course, they can be much higher usage outside of this range.
yeah, thank you.
Any questions on the table?
I have a question.
Sure.
So the 3/4 inch, I think by what I've read so far, it's a 1% increase with a 5% increase in depreciation. Is that correct? A total of 6%.
Ask me that again.
It's a 1% increase in the water and sewer, plus a 5% depreciation increase.
On which line are you looking at for that? Tell me what
I'm just
line.
going by what I've read so far.
If I may, Commissioner McLam, can we use an example of maybe the meter size 3/4 inch on the top line?
We can do that.
Okay, so,
It shows 3%.
right, so we're gonna, in that, so you're going to the far column with the final proposed rates with the 95% depreciation, correct? So we see a 3% increase overall for your combined water and sewer for the base charge, correct, Richard?
That's correct. And I
Okay.
think,
Okay, and then we have a volume charge down below for your tier. So you have a 3% increase just in your base charge, correct?
that's correct.
For the meter, and then your volume charge per 1,000 gallons, you have a 6% increase just in your residential tier 0 to 4,000, or 7% increase from greater than 4,000.
So now we're looking at 9%. Is that correct?
Well, you have How would you best explain that? You've got a base increase, and I think that's why that it helps to see the residential bill comparison on the bottom, but go ahead and speak
Right.
to,
It's,
go ahead and
it's,
speak to that combination.
to your
please.
first question, I think you're saying of the 6%, is 5% of that caused by the 5% increase in depreciation.
Correct.
Is that your question? That's not correct. So the base rate, as you see, absorbs all of CIP. So included in your 3% is already that 5% increase in CIP funding built into your 3%. And it's, I can't tell you exactly what percentage of that percentage it is. I don't have that in front of me. But so 3% includes your increase in funding for CIP, I think is your question. To your second question about how do you break down the rates? It's almost impossible to look up at this table. In the old days, we used to provide a table and said a typical residential customer is, I think, 4,200 gallons, and that was consistent. So we always had that linear line, kind of a baseline comparison. Of course, when we went to a tiered model, that kind of went away because now those usages appeared. So it's a much better way to look at it, to look at the bottom section of your chart and say, okay, let's look at actual customer bills. The customer we're using 0, 1,000. And those percentages will give you a better idea of what a customer would see in form of increases.
All right. So what I'm seeing now by how he just described it, the normal person that uses up to 4,000 gallons will increase $2.60. Is that correct?
Just for the base charge.
Where are you seeing the $2.60 on the 1,000 gallon line?
Okay, so the 3% will be $1.21.
Mhm.
And then you said residential tier 1, 0 to 4,000 gallons, 6% is $1.39. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So that's a total of
Per thousand.
$2.60.
That's per thousand.
So it's not up to 4,000, it's per thousand.
That's per thousand. These are tiered rates per 1,000 gallons. I think that's where the confusion may be coming in. So if you instead look at the bottom chart, then you can actually see total increases, which is your base charge and your volume charges. The volume charge percentages are somewhat misleading because that's per thousand, but you see it's hard to say it's 6% for every customer because if they go over 4,000, now that's somewhere between 6 and 7%. Once they're above 4,000, it's 7%. So that's why we provide kind of a table at the bottom. Those are accurate numbers of what your current bill would be now versus the new rates.
All right, so what I just figured up, I'm sorry to interrupt you,
Go ahead.
$1.21 at 3%.
Mhm.
At 4,000 gallons, an additional $6.77 for a total of $7.98 up to 4,000 gallons. Is that correct?
I'm not doing all that math in my head, I don't think, but you're saying 139 and 4,000 gallons at 139?
Let me just put a focus on
Yeah,
this.
look at the chart.
So if we look at if we have the chart on page 41, we use the table at the bottom, Commissioner McLean, if we use your residential bill comparison, number of gallons at 4,000 gallons, which I think is what you want to do, right?
Correct.
If you follow that all the way across to the right, you will see
$6.
the increase of $6.77, which includes your base charge and your volume charge, because that's how we charge the residential rate. So $6.77 is that increase, or 5%, which is right next to it. So we've given you the increase and the overall percentage versus what it is currently in terms of our rates with the 90% depreciation.
So the $1.21 doesn't mean anything.
It does, it's already included in that calculation down below.
$6.77.
That's right.
That's correct.
Yep.
It's included in your total bill. That's why it's easier to look at total bills because there are different percentages, whether you're looking at base or volume and then the tiered volume. So a 4,000 gallon customer, as Scott said, they would see a $6.77 increase in their bill under the proposed rates, which is 5% higher than the current.
So the average family will see $6.77 up to $10.39 per bill. Is that correct?
Under the assumption that the average
average
family is 4,000 to 6,000 gallons.
Correct.
That caveat, that's correct.
Correct.
So the charge for 2,000 gallons. What I didn't I was gonna ask if the 9151 was combined base and volume. And it is, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's the
So-
bill you see in the mail.
Before we did the rate structure, the rate structure.
Mhm.
I think it was lower than 9151 for 2,000 gallons. I think it was $86.88 or something to that effect. So this is going higher than what we tried to get away from.
Now, remember before you change, the original rate structure included 2,000 gallons.
Right. And everybody was paying that no matter what. And I got that,
They used
but I'm just
500
trying to
gallons
figure
or
out,
Right.
1,999 gallons, they still paid for 2,000.
Right. And Mr. Chair and Vice Chair, if you want to have that reviewed as far as what those values were, we will research that and provide you with that number.
but
So that we have that perspective on what that actual value was. Comparing to
so
now.
what I
That's-
was trying to get at, that 399 increase at 2,000 would bring it up to what it was 2 years ago plus 399 is what I'm saying. So it's only 399 in the past 2 years. But if you can get me the actual numbers, I thought it was 86 something for both. For the minimum, I thought it was about that much.
I'm remembering, but don't hold me to it, that it was maybe 86, 84.
86.
But I would want to
Yeah,
look at that number and confirm.
okay, that was my question.
Any other questions? All right, Richard. Any
What's the next item? Scott?
There's a monthly utility bill rate comparison for monthly usage on a chart on page 42. If the board would like any further information on that, we'd be happy to discuss that. Otherwise, I'll move on to 10C, the proposed FY24 schedule for rates, fees, and charges. This chart, Mr. Chair, the chart is on your screen. Did you want us to explain the chart?
I would like to have it explained.
Okay.
The chart is a representation of the bottom portion of the table we were just looking at. Basically, what it takes those same 1,000 increment residential customers from 0 to 1,000 or 10,000, and it charts them for you. Sometimes that's a little easier to see than a table. It can get somewhat misleading sometimes. So this takes that same data and it charts it on a chart and shows you the increase in the current bill to the proposed bill for each of those 1,000 tier categories. And you'll see at the very low end of 0 usage, customer, of course, is just paying base fee. It would go from 44.64 to 45.85, which is back to that $1.21 that Mr. McGlynn was mentioning a minute ago. That's your strict base fee increase. The base fee increase is your capital improvement funding pretty much. Most of your operating expenses are coming through volume. So 0 customer, you're paying that base fee only, you're not paying any volume increases. That's higher percentage we saw in the previous table. And that's why you're seeing that $1.21 increase. As you go up, you'll see that gap widens because with the new rate model board approved last year, instead of 1 of 23. Well, 23, we're going with 3 fiscal years.
Yeah.
That's the way it's geared. Once you pass that 4,000 and go into the higher tiered volume rate, you would expect that gap to increase. And that was the rate model was built.
Richard, when it says current rates to proposed rates, 95% of the capital improvement funding.
That's right.
So what is that math calculation?
The 95%.
The equation,
Okay, so the 95% funding, right now, our budget in past years, in the current year, has $2.3 million worth of depreciation expense in the budget, which
Okay.
correlates to the capital improvement funding plan of 2.3 million per year. That was funded at 90%, which means that the 10% of that was not funded. So 230,000, it's not funded.
Okay.
So we're basically putting just over 2 million aside in a capital improvement fund built out of current year rates. In the new year, in the 24-25 proposed budget year, the Finance Committee had recommended that we increase the CIP fund to 95%. And depreciation expense in the current budget increased by 100,000 to 2.4 million. So now, in essence, if you approve the 95% funding model, then you would be unfunded depreciation of 120,000 versus that
Okay.
230,000.
So 90 to 95% is the difference of $230,000.
120,000. For 24-25 is 120,000 because it's 2.4 million. And each 5% is worth 120,000. This year, it would be 230,000 because it was 2.3, 10% of 2.3 is 230,000. But as your depreciation expense increases itself, then of course and of course, when we go to 27, 28, and the I-85 project is completed in 75, let's say $75 million project hits your depreciation, that depreciation number is going to increase substantially, of course. But it's been fairly stable between 2.2 and now it's up to 2.4. And the 2.4, the 100,000 increase is primarily because the water treatment plant upgrades for 15 million roughly last year came online, and that hits your depreciation schedule. Ms. Daniels, is that?
Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Are there any other questions on this chart? It's a little bit easier to understand following this model than the kind of complex table with a little too much data, maybe.
No? Mr. Chair, anything further on that item?
No, I think that pretty much covers our rate chart, our rate review charts. Then we'll move on to our proposed schedule of rates, fees, and charges.
Thank you. So in providing essential public water and sewer services to customers in Southern Granville County, SGWASA incurs substantial operating and capital expenses. The SGWASA Board of Directors has determined that the provisions in this schedule of rates and fees and charges are necessary to adequately sustain SGWASA's utility operations. So you have in your agenda this evening, starting on page 43, the schedule of rates, fees, and effective that are proposed for July 1st, 2024. You have in front of you a complete version of the updates and what the book would look like for approval. We normally ask the board to approve this booklet of rates, fees, and charges along with the proposed budget at the same time because they support each other. This evening, what I've captured for you in terms of the next item, 10D, is related to this document that you have in front of you. So if you will look at page 67, I have on 10D a review of changes to the schedule of rates, fees, and charges. And so we can go back and forth in this document, but what I provided for you is basically a summary sheet showing you of all the sections that we have within our schedule. And you can see in the red text to the right, all of the text amendments and new rates that have been updated throughout this companion document. One of the things I would like to point out to you is that we've added a new item 8.5, which is part of our scheduled miscellaneous charges and fees on page 68 of your agenda, which is what we're calling fire flow testing fees. This is a new section of fees added. So I just want to give you an idea of the text amendments. The reason we did this year, this document has been in place for about 3 years now, and we review it annually. And we decided this year that we need to go back through it and do some wordsmithing, some amendments, some operational things change the way we do some business, other things. So we do have those text amendments. Now, this entire document was discussed with the Finance Committee, and actually a red line copy that they could review every page and every change as it was presented. As we move forward this evening into the next item, 10E, this is also related to your scheduled rates, fees, and charges. What I provided for you this evening is just a brief summary of notable changes to the scheduled rates, fees, and charges. So you'll see on page 69 of your agenda, table 1, this is water meter related base charges. And this is a copy of basically our red line version to show you what the base rates were and what they're proposed at. For example, in this table, Looking at page 70, you will see that we have several items that I wanted to bring to your attention. For bulk water sales, section 1.7. We're looking at in that table, instead of a $15 flat fee, we're going to go 2 times the non-residential water volume fee, which seemed to make more sense to us and be more realistic and tied to our rate tables. In the next item, we have service initiation fees and security deposits. We have an update to that cost. That handling fee basically from $10 to $15, for example. And the one item that generated a lot of discussion at the finance committee meeting, and possibly the finance committee members would like to speak to this, is our schedule of service charges and fees as related to late payments on past due balances of $5 or more. Our current fee is $5 or 1.5%, minimum $5. We were asked to look around the area just to see how we complied with some of our rates as well and our fees for late payments. And after discussion, it was recommended by the finance committee to increase that rate from $5 to $10 for late fee payments. And that comes back as revenue into your budget.
So the 1.5% minimum, what is that on the outstanding balance?
Richard, is that correct? On the outstanding balance?
It's on the outstanding amount of that bill. So the bill that you receive on the 20th, if you haven't paid it by the 5th of the following month, it's 1.5% or $10, whichever is less.
Okay.
And then you will see on the following pages, section 4.5, section 6.1, and so on and so forth. So I just wanted to bring these items to the board's attention just to give you a perspective on some of the things that had changed. One of the things I would like to talk about is on page 71, the schedule of tap charges and fees. You can see there's a lot of redlining text down below where we were offering quite a la carte list of different services, and we've discovered that we can nominalize most of those costs now into what we would call as a minimum or maximum depth of service line equal to 8 feet. So those are costs that we know that we can capture in the construction that we can do down to basically that elevation. We start to get into some more costly excavation and installations once we go beyond that 8 foot. So that would be, those costs would actually be determined for a customer. So we did that both on our water and sewer service line installations, a lot of redlining through that. And again, that's from the experience that we have and actually noting those costs over the years, looking at those cost proposals and recognizing that once again, to keep our cost of service in line with the services we're actually providing to these customers, mostly new construction, new customers, if you will, coming into our system. And lastly, I just want to point out hydraulic fire flow testing fees on page 73. This is a chart to calculate to recover the cost of hydrant fire flow testing for water system when requested by anyone other than the local fire department contained within the SGWASA service area. So what does that mean? We have a lot of interest from developers coming into our area and have been. It's increasing week over week as we get closer to the construction of the I-85 project. And a lot of these developers want to know, what's your sewer capacity in certain areas? What will it be? What's your fire flow capabilities, whether it be residential or commercial? So we have gratis gone out and done the fire flow for them. And so we thought it was appropriate to look at what is required, because fire flow testing requires a few employees and multiple hydrants and moving back and forth with equipment. So we thought it was appropriate to put that charge back on a future developer, if you will, as they're calculating their cost for development. One note I put in highlight here about system development fees. So our system development fees actually reside within this document as well. And McGill Associates, one of our contract engineering firms, just completed the state required minimum 5-year review of the system development fees, also known as SDFs. This report will be presented to the board of directors in an upcoming meeting, possibly as soon as May. Any changes to the SDFs will require a public comment period and a public hearing prior to board adoption. Should the board of directors choose to modify the SDFs, then the FY 24-25 schedule of rates, fees, and charges will need to be modified and approved by the board of directors. So if the system development fees are increased, decreased, changed, and approved by the board, that would be following the required public hearings, and that would require an update to the schedule. It would be most likely just related to that SDF fees. If you're looking for that, Commissioner McLean, I see you paging through that
I'm
book.
flipping back to ask questions when you're done. You're good.
Did you find it?
I'm looking at flipping back to where my questions are.
Okay. It's in our book schedule of SDFs. In other words, most likely we'd be looking at that upgrade or that approval with the board, possibly July, August. So, all right, thank you. That's all I have on that information.
So we voted on the system development fees a couple meetings ago. We're not done with it yet.
You approved a system development fee policy. And now there are fees that have been established and are established and are part of this manual here. Based again on meter size. If someone can help me find that quickly. Okay, page 16.
Oh, that's where my questions are
There
right
you
now.
are. Okay, page 49 of the agenda, page 16 of rates fees effective 7/1/24. You will see, for example, we have sewer rates, monthly sewer usage, sewer base charge fees. And wait, it's not the right. Anyway, I'll find it while you have a discussion.
Okay. Any other questions?
I have a bunch of questions.
Okay, there they are. Page 58 of your agenda. So on page 58 of the agenda, you will see section 5.1 water system development fees. Now, these are system development fees per 1 ERU. That's an equivalent residential unit. So looking at table 20 of the water system development fees, meter size in inches, for example, top of the page. Could you just scroll up just a little bit so they can see that? There you go. 3/4 inch meter, 1 ERU, and the fee for that presently is $2,096. We also have a related table on page 59 of your agenda for system development fees for the sewer system. Once again, 3/4 inch meter, 1 ERU, $3,452. So each meter size then relates to different ERUs, as you can see, from 1 ERU all the way to 155 ERUs down at a 12-inch meter, or $500,000 for that. So what questions do you have regarding that?
I'm guessing I don't have questions on that, but
Okay,
I do have one question. Those combined, just say $5,500 to give a round number. Okay,
48.
gotcha.
yes,
That's all I have.
okay.
So I've got a question on the hydraulic fire flow test. A lot of these fees that are in here require contractors and a separate person outside of SGWASA. And there's a couple TBDs in here or C note belows. Is that because we don't have an engineer? An engineer could do a lot of these functions.
No, I think I don't want to say no. I think that there are a lot of things that our engineering team can do and would do, but we also have professional services outside of what they're doing for us. And sometimes these are actually contractors that we are hiring to do, for example, an excavation underneath Highway 56 with special equipment, excavators and boring equipment is something that we don't own. So we basically have to get proposals for that type of construction. And then that is a pass through to the other person, the developer, the builder that's having the work done. A lot of to get to your question more specifically, some of our plan reviews.
That's the next question. You're reading my mind.
Right. So the plan reviews, for example, section 7.2 on your agenda, page 72, we had language in there where predominantly our engineering staff was doing the reviews. However, we have the ability to use outside consulting for that, and that cost would then be paid back to the consultant or the other contractors, if you will. In our current situation, we've kind of tightened up that language a little bit just to give us the ability to do those estimates up front, because we've learned that these projects can get very complicated. And so it's very difficult sometimes to put a nominal fee on a plan review of $500, because you may have one plan set that only requires 4 or 5 plan sheets. You may have another set that has 25 or 50 plan sheets, plus a grease interceptor, plus backflow devices. plus other fire flows, and that requires additional review. So in other words, we just want to make sure that when we get in that situation, we can actually cost that out and provide that cost back to the developer, the builder, and say, these are your plan review fees for this project.
It just seems like with all these costs that are to be determined, or we don't have a number in there, it's going to make it more difficult for a developer to work around here because he's got no idea what the cost is until he gets to that point.
Well,
And how do you plan on a project cost when you don't have any idea how much it's going to cost until you get there?
I think that we do a very good job of talking to developers 3 years before they're ready to start a project. Because that's usually what happens. And they're asking,
Plus 3 years.
they're
before.
asking these questions on what are these costs? And we are very upfront with, well, tell us what type of project that you're working on. And we can give you a swag in terms of what your investment may be for a plan review. What your system development fees are, what your meter charge is, possible excavation, if it's an open cut, if it's a bore, those type of things. So they are very interested in that, and they do ask us those questions, and we do supply that to them. We also have a section in here where sometimes the developer has to pay for or cost share hydraulic analysis of what they're bringing to the community. Because just because we're going to have all kinds of capacity once the I-85 project is done, there may be portions of the collection system or distribution network that can't handle a large project that's coming in because the existing water main is 6-inch and they need a 12-inch. Well, that requires hydraulic analysis and flow modeling as well. So,
We could feed it into the model to get there.
right, and we don't know today until we talk about their project and how it may affect upstream and downstream, what those costs may be. But we're very upfront about that, and we get those things done. And those costs help these developers, builders drive their business decisions on what they're going to do or what they're not going to do.
So the hydrant fire flow testing,
Mhm.
some fire departments in this area have offered to do the fire flow testing. And my question is, instead of hiring an outside agency other than the local fire, wouldn't it be cheaper for us to get a certified person on each fire department, if they want it, who could do the hydrant fire flow testing for SGWASA and paint the fire hydrants while they're doing them?
What's
And
fair?
we would kill, because SGWASA doesn't have the manpower to do it themselves. Let's use our local resources that we have, is my thought. Pay them $250 an hour.
That's a very good question. This
Thank you.
is,
I think you combining routine maintenance.
No, I'm not. I know
with
what.
hydraulic fire flow testing.
I know what that
well,
is,
let
but
me,
they would have to be certified.
so the cost that we have here is for on-demand fire flow that our crews would perform. So we are going to stop what we're doing and go do these fire flows. We take a look at existing flow data that we have on hydrants because of the fire departments doing the same thing around us. And we say, this is the information we can provide to you on the existing fire flows. 9 times out of 10, it's not enough. And they want more information. They want more flows. Now, I have no qualms about saying, well, possibly we can get the local fire department to do that for you and come out and provide you with that. Or if we can't, here's a charge for us to come out and do it. When would you like to have that? Yesterday is usually their answer. So as they're trying to make decisions on development, but I think it's something we can work through. And again, we're looking at the data that we have to say the most recent data we have from 2022 is this in this area. Is that enough for you to do your analysis? Sometimes it is, other times they want to come out and have it run again with their own engineering firms. So we try to accommodate them as best we can.
I'm just thinking, a lot of our fire departments could use a certified person and get paid $250 an hour to do it for what's in their fire district. They know the area, they are familiar with those fire hydrants, and like I said, I know they have to be certified, so maybe we could do something to help our local fire departments while we're doing that.
Sure.
Any other comments, questions?
I do.
Yep.
All right, I'm gonna go back to page 16.
Page 16 of the agenda book or page
Yes.
16 on
The
the,
agenda book.
Okay.
What is the 3% wage schedule adjustment?
Okay, so we have a document classification and pay schedule. I didn't include it in this document. Give me a minute, I could possibly pull it up from a previous meeting. Maybe while we're doing that, maybe if you would find that for me while I talk about it. So I think it's in the finance committee meeting of March 21st. Yes, it is. Okay. So it's going to be in March 21st, and it's going to be on page 18 of 30. Excellent. Okay, so in a minute, you will see on your screen. If you make that a little bit larger, thank you. So this is the FY 23-24 classification schedule that you have in front of you. So this is our current schedule effective July 1st, 2023. This classification scale basically outlines by grade, status, classification, minimum salary, midpoint, and maximum. So we have this description through grade 0 through 26. And that's 26 is on page 19, the next page. And this basically shows you the classification of all the types of labor and professionals that we have on staff, as you can see from the classification, and what their ranges are for that. So when we talk about a 3% wage increase, what we do is we take that 3% and take it across the board for all of these minimum, midpoint, and maximums. And what you end up with then is on page 20 of 30. Then you end up with a proposed schedule, but basically it's taken that and shifted that to reflect that 3% across the board as far as those.
Have we done that every year?
We've done that every year, and that was a recommendation that came out of the personnel study back in 2019 to remain competitive with the utilities around us, so that you don't end up in a situation where you have not done this and your rates of pay per hour are so out of schedule with your area or competition that in order to catch up, that you have to have a major increase to your schedule. And if I am correct, and I think Richard Ballmer would help me, our finance director here, in 2019 and 18, in order to make that schedule change adjustment to bring our employees up to competitive scale, we reduced our depreciation to 80%. We took it out of CIP, backed it down to 80% to fund that program to get the employees up to where they need to be on that schedule. And it was a recommendation that we do this annually so that we don't fall behind.
So,
I don't see this happening in other areas. Most companies will do up to a 4% merit increase. And occasionally you'll see a cost of living raise thrown in with that, which is usually 1.5%, but that's not on a normal basis.
Well, you could say that the schedule adjustment is very similar to your COLA, cost of living adjustment. And last year it was 5% that the board approved, I believe.
last year was 5%.
And I think the year before that was 3%, and then the board came back and offered an additional bonus pay
Right.
on
But-
top of that.
And if they don't do COLA, it's actually classified as a equity adjustment. So that's the terminology that's used.
Classification, yeah, adjustment.
That's the annual classification schedule.
The city of Durham doesn't do this.
And this year, the employees are getting 2 extra weeks' pay for the payroll adjustment.
And yeah, I understand City of Durham doesn't do that. But if you look at the wages in the City of Durham versus wages here, you see the discrepancy. You see how far behind we are compared to people performing a similar job there. And that's one of the problems we've experienced over the years is in turnover of employees. And that's why we went to this several years ago to try to keep employees.
but we're doing other things.
Yeah,
We adjusted we stopped payroll changeover to accommodate them because it wasn't their fault that the payroll system had to be changed.
Correct.
And we're giving them 2 weeks paid on top of 52 weeks of pay. They get 2 more weeks. The other thing is we dropped the deductible on the medical insurance already this year. And we are increasing the 401k to a 3% match if the board approves it. So I agree with Kenneth on this one.
but Jordan, you have some comments?
Well, I was just gonna say, when you change from a weekly or semi-monthly to a bi-weekly, that's just the way the calendar goes. So that we're not really giving them anything. It's the pay cycle is differently.
We're not doing that one yet.
Right, I'm just saying that's the proposed.
No,
Change
what's
the payroll.
proposed is that they get paid after they work instead of before they work. They get
Right, you're
paid a
paying
month
them-
afterwards.
Right, but it's still bi-weekly. So when you go to a bi-weekly, you're going from 24 to semi-monthly to 26 pay periods in a year. That's where you're saying the 2 weeks are different.
And just if I may, just for correction, we are not proposing to go to bi-weekly. At this
No, we're
point, we're
not.
still staying on a monthly basis, but we do have to make a schedule change, a payroll change that the board approved actually previously to make this change. Now, that cost is not part of your budget this evening. It's not calculated in that. That's kind of a one-time payment. So our proposal to the board was going to be, instead of putting it into this budget where it would affect rates, just basically have it as a one-time payment. When that comes up, and just take that out of fund balance. That's where to take that money to take that 2 weeks. And this was discussed at the finance committee meeting as well.
Okay, yeah.
So-
okay.
So let me ask Priscilla this question.
Okay.
Was that an extra 2 weeks so that they wouldn't have to use their
Comp time or vacation.
correct?
Mhm.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So in essence, we are giving all employees 2 weeks paid.
Yeah, yes.
So they get paid for 54 weeks instead of 52 this year.
Well, you're giving them a bonus pay is what you're doing, and it has to be classified as payroll, because we're required to pay our employees every 30 days. And if you remember from that discussion, it was going to be a 6-week period, and we were proposing that you use
Yeah, which
comp time, vacation time alone. And the board said at that time,
doesn't
no,
make sense.
that does
Correct.
not make sense to charge our employees for them to use
Right.
that. And therefore, we are proposing, the board proposed
Right.
that the employees get that bonus pay, if you will, for that change in the entire program that has been in effect since SGWASA's existence.
Right.
And that's what we were doing to affect payroll and move forward basically with automatic timekeeping, payroll, the financial system, just as a reminder. Now,
Okay,
that dollar amount that you're referring to, and I don't remember the exact dollar amount, but the board was provided with that information by our finance director. That amount is not included in your budget. It's not associated with the rates. It's a one-time pay. So we propose that it come out of fund balance specifically that we have to pay for that when that
Okay.
occurs.
Right.
So the schedule that you have in front of you here is a document that comes to the board after the budget is approved. Basically, it's brought up and discussed during the budget so that we can take a look at what that wage schedule adjustment looks like. And then once the board is in a position where they're going to approve the budget and we know what these values are, if that schedule would change to 3%, 4%, or 5%, we would make that change. Then we bring this document to the board for review and approval, usually at the June board meetings. Just to give you an idea of the timing of this, if the board were to approve the budget in May, for example, this is a companion piece.
And keep in mind too, that, we are a 24-hour facility at the water and the wastewater plant. So we're competing with places like Durham that has weekend shifts. But these folks don't have to work weekends. That's who Mebane, Burlington, Durham, that's who we're losing people to, because these folks have to work every other weekend. So that's why we stay competitive as well.
Good. I have another question.
Okay,
So we looked at going to 95% depreciation. Can we see what that would look like as a 92%?
The answer is we can run those values at any percentage. And I think, Richard, would you come up to the podium for a minute? I think that you said for each percentage increase, it would be, what was the value?
It was 120 per
Each 5%.
5%,
Each
represents
5%.
120.
Okay,
except for this year, it's different because it's going to 230.
No, the old defunded depreciation was 230.
Okay, so it's 120.
The 24-25 that we're talking about, every 5% represents 120 in extra revenue you need. So if you wanted to say 2.5%, that's going to be 60,000, right? So you would need 60,000 less in revenue if you cut to 95 to 92.5, let's say, for ease of discussion. That's 60,000 less revenue you need, which means 60,000 less is built into the rates. But, and I can run those rates for you, but I think you're gonna find that 60,000 over 12 months across all tiers of customers is not gonna change your rates much, your base rates.
So if it's 120,000 for every 5%, if we go up to 100,000, we're only talking $240,000 difference.
If you went from 90 to 100%, that is correct. It would be 225,000, just under $250,000. That's correct.
So if we cut it down to, say we cut it down to 92, it would be what, about $70,000? 60, well.
Well, 60 will be 92 and a
60 would
half.
be half.
Now you would have unfunded of roughly 180,000 because you've got 120 first 5% and 2.5%.
Yeah, but-
and that's 60. So
And the reason we're asking all these questions is we're trying to not make a rate increase as much for our customers. We're trying to keep the rate increase down.
All right, so the issue is everybody around us, and I know everybody keeps speaking about it, everybody around us
please.
is a lower rate.
Back to the agenda.
that's probably true.
So we're trying to keep these rates down so that not as much, there's not as many problems coming from the people that we represent.
No, I totally understand. We do the same thing internally when we're trying to generate the budget as well. I will say this for the benefit of the full board, just so we understand base rates and volume rates in this new model especially. Just keep in mind that CIP, appreciation fund and CIP, is going to flow through your base rates. A large amount of your increases are due not to the CIP funding, because the first finance committee meeting, and I believe even the second one, you saw rates at 90%. That's where we're kind of at this year's. And I think the finance committee remembers that the largest percentage, if you look at that 1,000 to 10,000 gallon chart we looked at earlier for customer billing, the bulk of those increases are not related to CIP funding, because we started at 90 and we saw some of these same rate increases, as you recall. They're caused by operational increases, which are affecting your volume rates. Our operating expenses went up approximately $1 million this year. And so that's kind of where, I guess what I'm trying to say to the board is CIP can make slight differences in your base rates, but if you're looking to cut those actual bill amounts down, you're going to have to look more in the area, I think, of operational expenses.
And the fact that our customer base since 2020, when I first came on this board, has really not increased at all. And until we see growth,
That's correct.
we're not going to be able to do much about it until that happens. I think I started, it was at 5,200 customers. We're up to 56 now, 5,600, something like that. But 400 customers in 4 years is not a lot. And I've said it a million times at these meetings. Our customer base is the biggest battle that we are fighting. And as you brought forward in the numbers that you brought, our non-billable revenue, which is made up of what?
Your
Bounce check charges and
non-bill are your fees, basically, not your water use and sewer use that's based on meter usage. It's your fees, your late fee, your non-payment fees, your return check fees, the administration fees you just saw related to setting up a new account, the administration opening an account fee, which was $10. Those types of fees are your non-billings.
And we took, I think it was, Linda, $17,000 Was it 17,000 we were absorbing for the service fees for the kiosk in the lobby?
Something.
Just leave it the way it is.
1,700, 17?
That's still in this budget because that transition is not
So
starting
here's what
until
it
next
is.
year.
Next year.
And we don't know at what
Not gonna make a
point next year Tyler will be in place to absorb those fees. So
Okay,
that is still in the budget, and I believe that number, don't hold me to it, but I believe that number was roughly 18,000.
something like that.
Yeah.
That's correct.
So once that happens, that will come out of our operational costs.
That's
But
correct.
it's in here for now because it's not going to happen before the fiscal year ends. Or starts.
We will absorb some of those next year, and we just don't know how many months we will absorb before that's in
Okay.
place. That's correct.
Okay.
So it's left in this budget.
So I know that that is not represented in this document, and I just wanted the board to know that that is something that the finance committee did vote on, and we did decide to try to save $17,000 a year on that one.
That's correct.
Commissioner,
And when you mention our rates compared to those around us, we're not a municipality. We can't raise the tax rate 1 cent or 2 cent
Mhm.
to help offset the cost involved. The money that the revenue generated by the customers is what our revenue is, and we have to work with. You take a county-run organization or municipality-run organization, they can supplement in ways that we can't. We can't supplement. And there's several factors involved there. So we can't really compare ourselves to Durham. We can't compare ourselves to any other place because they're not a water and sewer authority only.
Also, that's it.
Yeah.
well, and Mr. Chair, if I may, just to support that in this budget, I think that the two greatest challenges to this organization are maintaining our staff, okay, keeping our operators here and not
Mhm.
leaving basically the organization. We're a lean staff, we're less than 50 employees throughout the entire organization. But the year-over-year inflation, the last couple of years is real. And it's something that when you run 24/7 and you run pumps and motors all the time, as we are doing to supply water and wastewater, when we see those 7%, 8% year-over-year costs, plus chemicals going up, plus electricity at 26% this year, Richard proposed, correct?
The electricity increase this year alone is 160,000, 26% increase over last year.
Okay, so I can't control that.
When I say.
Mhm.
I can't control that. That's just a bill that's coming in. So as we're taking a look at these operational expenses, obviously, we don't want to see rates increase. I still have to produce the water in the sewer 24/7, and this is real. And as I opened up and said in my statement, we've done a good job the last 12 to 18 months to offset some of these inflationary effects because we had built into our budget some positions that went vacant that we couldn't fill. So we used that money to offset those expenses. Two professional engineers basically on staff for that. And you see that in some of the budget amendments that we have. So that's the reality. That's the challenge here. And I think that I won't speak for the board, but I know it's challenging. The horizon, let's not forget about what's the near term horizon either. Depreciation, once the I-85 project is complete in 3 years, USDA requires us over 40 years to fund that 100%, correct?
Don't recall.
Okay, but it has to be, we have to fund that depreciation.
Yeah, I was thinking that was part of the document.
That's part of the agreement that we have to fund
Yeah,
that, which
that
we'll
is
take a look at that. We have some large projects on the horizon still with PFAS coming at us too. So I don't have a revenue source for that right now. We received a grant and we're applying for grants for that, but those are some very real costs ahead of us in the next 3 to 5 years as well, just to make the board, to continue to make the board aware.
But PFAS hasn't even, the regulations haven't come down. And once they do, I'm sure the federal government's going to give us 5 to 7 years to do it. So
I've heard 3
why are
years,
we
Commissioner.
spending all this
3
money
years.
now when we don't need to?
I've heard 3 years as soon as the rule is final. We expect that in April or May. And that's when
You got to
clock-
think about something.
This year.
now.
This year, that's when
Yeah.
the clock starts to tick. So,
With PFAS. The EPA already has a range in mind of where they want to go.
Mhm.
They're just negotiating the fine points of it now. The other part of it is this a nationwide problem. It's not a Gravel County problem or North Carolina problem. It's a nationwide problem. And there's only a limited amount of resources of engineers, technical firms that can work with these. Right now, there's a very limited amount of laboratories that can even measure in parts per trillion. I know the technology is coming and there will be more in the future, but you got to look at your construction companies. Who's going to build it? Who's going to install it? What about your supply chain? The chemicals or the carbon that you need, your equipment that you're going to need, you have a limited number of suppliers for that. And there's going to be a real push. And if we get behind the curve, right now we're in fairly good shape compared to a lot of other people I've talked to in the industry. That we are recognizing it, we're making plans, we're working towards compliance whenever the compliance figures come. But if we get behind, we're going to be one of hundreds of thousands throughout the nation trying to attack this problem.
Well, not only that, it's going to require storage
Yeah,
to dispose or contain it, because
Yeah.
you don't want it to go back in the water.
yeah, that is one thing to remove it. It's another thing to have it where it doesn't get back into the environment, contain it. And there's
So how
going
do
to
the
be,
people who have PFAS and PFOS in their wells, what are they supposed to do?
that is a extremely good
Because
question.
that's been found in Wake County wells already.
Right.
That's an extremely good question that I don't have an answer for. I'm not sure the state has an answer for it. But, we're,
That was a question.
we're facing a double-edged sword here. We're getting cut both ways. We're getting cut with the fact that expenses are growing up or going up. They're continuing to grow. And it's inflation is the force is pushing it up. And we're faced with basically stagnant revenue. So it's a storm brewing. I think I can speak for the entire board in saying not one of us wants a net rate increase.
No,
No.
Not one of us on here
Absolutely.
is for a rate increase. But unfortunately, with the stagnant growth, inflation, we're put in a position that we're between a rock and a hard spot when it comes down to it. Is there any other questions, any comments? Anybody like to say anything?
I mean, I at this time, I can't support a rate increase. I can't. I'm a family of 5. I can tell you what I pay in my water bill every month.
So where can you support a cut?
That's something that we'd have to figure out. But I mean, I mean, honestly, as somebody that works a full-time job as
I'm
with a family of 5 that I have to support with increases in power bills and my mortgage increase and everything like that, and
taxes.
taxes and everything else. I mean,
taxes.
I mean, you're already you're doing the money shuffle every month now, trying to move stuff around. So what you're going to pay?
Look, I understand you. I understand your position. I understand it completely. But as a board member, we have to come up with where we're going to cut.
Exactly, and that's something that we just have to figure out. We have to look at it.
We can't cut the electric bill.
No, I don't have any control over the power bill.
That's right. None of us do.
We have a solar water plant.
On sunny days.
Where's the revenue going to come from for the solar panels?
Right.
Okay.
Um,
You
Mr. Chair, I was just wondering, so just to look at numbers, I know we will not figure this out tonight, but from what he's saying about the rate, so if we don't go up, how much can you estimate how much money we will not have?
Oh, yes, that's an easy number. If you look.
I asked that question already.
If you look at-
I just need to hear it.
If you look at the ordinance on page 33
23.
of your agenda package, which is page 4 of the public hearing budget in a few minutes, But you see at the top in the second paragraph, the written paragraph, it says in comparison to the fiscal year 23-24 budget, the fiscal year 24-25 water sales and sewer use charges were estimated using a revenue increase of 600,000 for water, 550,000 for sewer, and 202,000 for capital. So if you do not raise rates and you do not cut any
Okay.
expenses, the budget expenses stay as they are, you're looking at the 600,000 plus 550,000, you're looking at 1,150,000 deficit
Mhm.
on your budget ordinance. Using a 95% funded CIP.
No, don't.
Because as we said earlier, operating expenses went up approximately that amount. So your revenues, of course, are in the rate model are reflected to get that revenue.
The
to pay for those
1.1
operating expenses.
The 1.150 would be at 95% or 90%?
95%.
How much money did we put back into the budget based on interest that we received this year?
Brought that budget to you in March. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. It was substantial.
Yeah, a whole lot better than it's been.
Yeah.
Now,
Go from 95 to 90.
this proposed budget, you'll see the ordinance has 432,000 in interest. I was at a regional advisory meeting with some bankers several months ago, and they warned all the finance directors that the feds are projecting to lower rates. And we know that is a month by month. They say they're going to do one thing and they don't do it.
I know.
So long story short, they warned to not base your
November and Jack 'em up in December.
24-25 interest income and assume that that's going to fund your operations for next year, because that's
I believe,
likely, their projection is that's not going to happen.
yeah, I believe what I heard was 1/4% if they do drop it,
And they said that in
Yes.
March, I don't think they
which is
did.
June
so-
or July is what I heard.
They've been saying that, so long story short, they were saying that by the end of 24-25, they were expecting it to be roughly your interest revenue approximately half of what it was this current year. That may not come to pass, and next year I may be bringing your budget amendment that says, no, we didn't make 432,000, we made 750,000. But you are taking a gamble in the operations that your your interest income is not going to be where the kind of the professional budget people, federal budget people are saying it's going to be, but. So that's kind of the short answer is you're looking at just under 1.2 million in the red. If you don't do some cuts to the budget and you don't raise rates, because that's the revenue you need to cover basically the operating increases. And we talked about if you took the 95 back to 90, then yes, that's 120,000 in revenue that you less than that 1.1 million. So now you're down a million, slightly under, or slightly around a million. Your main operating expenses, I can give you some comparisons in your proposed book. You've got you've got a chart in the public hearing document on page 7. It tells you your 4 main categories of expenses. Those are your debt service. I'm sorry, let me give you on the public hearing documents, page 7. I don't know if it's in this book. Is it in the agenda book?
Yeah, what page is that in the agenda book?
Let's see. Bear with us 1 second.
36, 37 has a pie chart.
36.
That's what we're looking for, the pie chart.
Okay.
I've got too many books, I apologize.
Could be worse
We'll
problems.
go up one more. That'll be our
Could be worse problems than that.
So there's your 16.5 million in expenses that we've been looking at on the ordinance. There are your 4 major categories of expenses. Debt service, personnel, operating expenses, and capital improvement. Debt service, I hope we all agree, there's no cut there unless you're doing a default on your debt. And I hope that's not the case. Your largest category, other than that, is personnel and benefits, which is 30%. All of the operating expenses are 31%. So you see the two, and of course, your capital improvement and depreciation is where we're talking about you can do some cutting. Of your operating expenses, this year's budget compared to the 24-25 proposed budget, you have large increases in, of course, wages and pay, and payroll taxes, so your pay and benefits are increasing approximately 49%. In the executive summary, we talked about some of that. You're looking at a health insurance premium increase. As I believe Ms. Kaczynski mentioned earlier, you're implementing a health insurance cap subsidy. We're looking at retirement plan, but the state says you have to increase that 0.75%. So there are a lot of things baked into there. Of course, payroll taxes are payroll taxes. So a lot of that is hard coded, some of it is not. You're adding the positions. If you look at the other major categories, as Scott mentioned, electricity is going up $160,000 this year. That's due to the rate increase we've already seen with Duke Energy, and they've already announced another tiered one. So that's 26% increase just in electricity cost alone. Capital outlay increased 110%. Professional services, which include legal and engineering, 125% for 208,700. So in those major categories alone, you can see that that's big chunks of money. We're not talking about $40,000, $50,000. We're talking about hundreds of thousands in those. As previously mentioned, I don't know that there is a way you can control electricity unless you did some kind of study and come up with more efficient ways to run the electricity. And your depreciation, of course, went up $100,000. So those are your largest increases in expenses for this project.
Richard, your last financial statement to us that you sent to the board, your last financial statement,
The March 31st one,
how much did you say on that financial statement was in the bank?
how much cash do we have?
In the
Cash?
bank?
Right, so available cash as of 2/29, I did the notes before my 3/31, is 33 million. Of that, 5.3 million is already in the capital improvement fund.
5.3. So that leaves us with 20 million that's not reserved or earmarked yet.
That's correct. Possibly 28, a little less than 28. So that's available cash, and of course, we talked about fund balance in the past for SGWASA. That as of February 29th, that was 66 million. But 66 million, that number skewed. You're better off looking at available cash because you've got all those fold ins of the system that came into the financial statements as contributed capital, but it's not spendable. We can't spend the water tower, we can't spend the water plant. But it overinflates because of the way SGWASA is formed, and it's an enterprise fund. It overinflates your true fund balance that you're used to seeing in cities and counties. And
So when we say fund balance, we're talking about the 33 million.
I always say focus at SGWASA, focus on available cash, not fund balance. Unless you're planning on selling some of your infrastructure to fund operations, you can't really look at fund
Time for
balance.
that motion now?
No,
I would like to just add something that Richard's talking about, and keep in mind, board, that our I-85 project, SGWASA has an obligation at this point of $6.8 million.
That's correct. Almost 6.9, I believe.
Almost $6.9 million. Okay. We also have construction administration and observation as part of that project. In other words, we have a $70 million project out there that's ahead of us. So if the board is considering doing anything with available cash, we just need to keep in mind, we need to run some projections on what cash is needed for these expenses coming up as well that we see, or if there's a timeline out there that the EPA says you have to complete this PFAS project in 3 years, and we're looking for $5 million to support that project, we've got to think about where's that money come from as well. So I'm not saying it's reserved or encumbered, but those are some things that we at least want to have a discussion on, so that we understand over the next 5 years what these costs look like across all of our programs, just to make sure that the board's making an educated decision. That's all.
And one thing to elaborate on there is the 1 million that the board's already set aside for the SGWASA expenses, the land acquisition, that legal expenses related to I-85. Most of that is still in your 33 million, even though you earmarked it. It hasn't been spent yet, so you can kind of reduce your 32 by 1 million.
Right.
and with all the projects we're involved in now, all the coming projects in the next 5 years, we're going to be involved in. Don't want to put us in a position where we have a problem with local government commission.
$1 million, they can go do that.
But I do think the PFAS is something that we really need to think about hard,
Mhm.
because the more information gets out, the more awareness. I don't think people are gonna like what the EPA is gonna say about the standards and the guidelines. They're gonna want it done like now.
Mhm.
And that's not, everybody, that's not gonna be able to happen, but we got to have the funding for it.
Yeah, we're hoping we can get some grants, that there will be some available, but that's not a guarantee.
No,
You prepare for the worst and hope for the best.
Because they may require some matching.
Yeah. And yeah, absolutely. Part of it, quite often there's a matching portion of the grant, so we got that to look at. Okay.
Before we get started.
Any other comments?
It's something.
I don't have
Think
any
we-
solutions right now.
I think we have covered the proposed schedule of rates, fees and charges. We've had a review of changes to the schedule rate, fees and charges. And we discussed notable changes to the rates and fees and charges. I guess we're down to item F, which is our organizational chart, current and proposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on page 74 of your agenda, you have the existing organizational chart approved by the board with the numbers and the positions, basically in that. On the following page, page 75, you have a revised version of that proposed version. And that's an increase of 2 full-time equivalents, 2 FTEs as they're referred to, and you will see that in red text further down, Crystal. See under operators, you see add 1 under the water treatment area and 1 under wastewater treatment area. That's where the 2 positions would align that are being proposed in the budget this next fiscal year. And then there's also some realignment at the top of the organizational chart in comparison to our existing chart where I have an engineering director and a utility engineer. I'm proposing that we take those 2 positions and basically convert the engineering director into an assistant director. And then basically just keep the utility engineer in position and just basically move it up in line on the chart with the other managers, if you will, and officers. So again, the 2 adds, if you will, to the proposed budget are shown as the operator positions. Currently, I have 5, I think is what I can read on this chart for wastewater and 5 over in water treatment as well. Be happy to answer any questions the board has.
All right, I'm sorry, because you went over that really quick and I can't see the names on here. I see assistant director added. And what else did you add on this on page 75?
So. Okay, so if you look at your top chart.
It already
basically,
has 5 and 5.
Underneath the executive director, you will see an assistant director that was formerly titled as the engineering director. So that position has just been reclassed and moved up.
I'm sorry, Tim was talking to me at the same, say that again. I'm sorry.
That's all right. So
Can be.
if you can see on screen.
Okay,
So starting at the executive director level, underneath me, the assistant director
correct.
has been reclassified from engineering director previously. So it was a fully funded full-time equivalent. Previously known or currently known as the engineering director. So that has been modified to assistant director. And the utility engineer of operations manager, which you see in that first line of blue boxes, is an existing position. It's vacant. Both those positions are vacant. That position has just been moved up to that line, if you will, along with the other managers.
Okay,
So the other changes were, as I mentioned, the 2 adds further down on the page in each one of our operating areas.
gotcha. I see it.
Yeah.
So you don't need an engineer any longer.
Well, keep in mind, I started off with 0 engineers.
Right.
I went to 1, I went to 2. I have none, even though that they're on the schedule because of vacancies. So I'm taking advantage of reclassifying 1 to an assistant director and keeping the 1 engineer. And we also expanded our contractual services. That's last year. The board is aware of that. We now have 3 contractual engineering services that work for us to pick up that heavy load. It never was the intention to design a full staffed engineering department. It was simply to be in a position that could manage projects and manage engineering. I've been managing that for the last year plus in terms of that load with working with the 3 different consultants on all the projects that you have in front of us. Most recently, we promoted an employee, Joel Coates, who's in our audience tonight, as project manager. So he's been a great help the last couple of months to carry up some of the load, shed some of the load that I've had on some of the things we're working on.
So the contractual engineering that we are using, is it less than hiring an engineer? Or is it
It's more.
costing us a lot
It's-
more?
It's more.
So that's in our operational costs for this budget.
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Now, the good news is a lot of the projects that we have on the CIP, the capital improvement program for the next 10 years, and that's a document that you don't have in front of you this evening. You will have that document for you in July. Basically, once I have all the numbers for the year and close out, we can put those numbers on the schedule, update the schedule so that you can see all the projects. 95% of the projects I would say that we do in the capital improvement have an engineering function associated with them. So if we are going to spend, for example, $500,000 on PFAS testing, which was on our schedule this year, it's an approved CIP. There's a portion of that money that goes to the engineering. Okay, so it's not like you have this big project over here that you're paying for and engineering coming out of your operating expenses. We can tie our engineering services back to that CIP because it's a component of that project. You have to design it, you can bid it, and then you have to manage it while you're building it. So we're
So it
building,
comes out of that 500,000 that they're billing us for.
excuse me?
So it comes out of that 500,000 that they're billing us for anyway.
Exactly. So
So
when we
it's not a
have
double
the,
charge.
when we have the Creedmoor pump station improvement, for example, the chlorine system, we had engineering already tied into that design. So that's a component of that entire cost.
Mhm.
As with land acquisition or anything else, it's tied into that top cost. So I just wanted you to understand as well that we try to shed as many operational costs, if you will, on that side and relate them back to the CIP projects
Right.
within that domain. And in order for us to spend the annual amount of, well, I think this approved CIP this year was about $3.7 million. To be aggressive, that's a lot of projects that have to be pushed out and managed. Now, we're not going to be successful on 100% of those projects. There's no way. We just don't have the throughput to be able to get those projects done. But our schedule shows you on that 10-year CIP what we should be spending per year on programs, what the carryover balance is as we move forward, because there's a lot of projects we haven't identified quite yet, the costs associated with those projects.
Right, yeah. And plus the assistant director the part of the criteria could be that they have an engineering background.
Would be nice.
Yeah. So then we would still have the best of both.
Okay. Any questions, comments on our organizational charge? Burning proposed. Any further? If not, we'll go to our public hearing portion of this meeting. And to give you some background, in accordance with North Carolina General Statute 159-12, filing and publication of the budget, the South Carolina Water and Sewer Authority shall hold a public hearing on its proposed budget to allow persons to be heard. The fiscal year 2024-2025 budget public hearing has been publicly noticed on the SGWASA website and the Butler-Creedmoor newspaper 3/29/24 and 4/5/24. Public comment presenters will be called in order of the date and time that their public comments were received by the board secretary. All those presenting public comments must abide by the public comment rules established by the SGWASA Board of Directors. Public comment presenters will have a maximum of 3 minutes to present their comments. Public comment presenters will have only one opportunity to speak during the public hearing. And we will call our public hearing to order. And the proposed fiscal year 2024 budget ordinance will be read aloud for the record. And then the public comment period will open. And public comment presenters who have completed the request to speak cards prior to the public hearing will be called by The presiding officer and the presiding officer shall adjourn the public hearing when either the allotted time expires or when all speakers are heard.
Mr. Chair, similar to last year, I asked the board secretary, our PIO, if she would create an audio video file to read the ordinance into the record for the public hearing. This is twofold. Not only does it help us this evening, but it was also something that we can publish on our website and social media. So when Crystal is ready, we'll actually have her start the recording and then close it out.
This is a presentation of the South Granville Water and Sewer Authority Annual Budget Ordinance for fiscal year 2024 to 2025. It is estimated that the following revenues will be available in the Water and Sewer Fund for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2024, ending June 30th, 2025. In comparison to the approved fiscal year 23-24 budget, the fiscal year 24-25 water and sales and sewer use charges were estimated using a revenue increase of $600,000 for water, a revenue increase of $550,000 for sewer, and $202,397 for capital. Water revenues are $6,300,000, wastewater revenues $9,350,000, non-billing revenue $472,800, interest income $432,540, bringing total revenues and other financing source totals to $16,555,340. The following amounts are hereby appropriated in the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2025. Expenditures are as follows. Administration Department 7110, $1,202,935. Human Resources Department 7114, $144,815. Engineering Department 7118, $516,106. Billing and Collections Department 7120, $530,564. Raw Water Department 7130 at $62,000. Water Treatment Plant Department 7133 at $2,031,475. Wastewater Treatment Department 7145, $2,576,292. Utilities, Meter Reading, Department 7136, $172,108. Waterline Maintenance, Department 7139, $955,819. Sewer Line Maintenance, Department 7140, $1,033,661. Pump Stations and Towers, Department 8000, $811,488. Depreciation Board and Other, Department 7200, $2,698,342. Projects and Studies, Department 7300, $50,000. Debt Service, Department 7500, $3,769,735, bringing total expenditures to $16,555,340. The grand totals of estimated revenues and other financing sources and expenditures, as well as other financing uses for all funds for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2024 and ending June 30th, 2025 are shown on screen. The Executive Director shall have the authority to reallocate appropriations between line items except for salary and benefits within a department up to a maximum of $10,000. Such reappropriations must be recorded like other reappropriations and reported at a subsequent Board of Directors meeting after the funds are moved. All transfers must be in accordance with the North Carolina General Statutes. The Executive Director shall not have any authority to appropriate fund balance or to increase total appropriations. The Finance Director shall establish and maintain all financial records which are in accordance with this ordinance and in accordance with the appropriate state statutes of the state of North Carolina. This concludes the SGWASA budget presentation for fiscal year 24-25.
Thank you. Yeah. Crystal, has anyone signed up for public comments?
They have not.
Did we receive any by email?
We have not.
Okay. I'm gonna open it up now. Is there anyone here present tonight that would like to speak? Come forward, state your name and address, and you have 3 minutes to make your comments.
Lynn Bailey, 221 12th Street here in Butner. I hadn't actually planned to speak tonight, and I've been absorbed in your discussions. And I wanted to bring up a couple of questions. As you all know, I've been the advocate for not putting our rates up for many, many years, and I've appreciated what the board's done. I'm kind of in two minds, and I can see the reality of what's facing us, and I understand the need for a rate increase. Equally, I know that it's really hurting people, especially families. But my question is, I'm sort of leaning on the side of going with a small rate increase if the objective at the end is that it's going to get easier. And my threshold is, once we get through the 85 project, is that not going to open up all the so everything on the other side? We've got moratoriums in Creedmoor. That's going to increase our customer base dramatically, is it not? So does that mean ultimately, if we make a small sacrifice now in 2027 is what we're looking at, are we going to see it even out because we're going to get the growth again, and we're not going to have this constant increase every year? As I say, it's hard to say no to this increase. It's nominal, but ultimately, I think I'd like to hear some sort of pledge that, you know, when we open up 85 and we get all this growth, we're not going to routinely have an increase every year. We're going to have the growth, and we should be able to handle all these major projects with more money coming in. I can't really say anything else about it because it's ultimately your decision. And to the people that are really suffering, I mean, I'm very lucky. I don't have that problem. It seems like it's a very small increase, you know, when we look at 3 and 5%. If we don't do it again next year, you know, then we're so much closer to 27, and we can start, the floodgates can open for growth, and ultimately we can plateau out, and it might have more revenue coming in for these major projects. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I speak on that a little bit, Chairman?
Yes.
The only project that I see coming up after that is the PFAS project. And we don't know how much that's going to cost. That's going to be an issue. And I agree with what you just said. It does bring growth to the area once that project's done, but we don't know how much the PFAS is going to cost us.
And if I may speak to it also, we don't know how much growth is coming. We don't know if it's going to be a little or it's going to be a lot, because the economy will play a big factor into how much growth comes and how fast it comes. The economy and the demand. I do know that when we had to shut down east of I-85, there was 1,400 homes proposed in the Butner area east of I-85 alone, not counting what was proposed in Creedmoor. It seems that the developers wanted to develop that area, and we've had trouble getting them to shift to other areas where we had water and sewer. STEM has experienced some growth from it. You know, and STEM is continuing to grow. But I'm getting off subject here. Is there anyone else like to speak tonight? As the saying goes, speak now if ever hold your peace. So, all right. And as far as this is concerned, this is I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing now. And the next step is the SGWASA board shall adopt the fiscal year 24-25 budget prior to June 30th, 24. That doesn't mean that we have to adopt the budget as presented. That means we have to adopt the budget. And the goal we have is we'd like to have the budget in place by the meeting next month, May 14th. We do have until the June meeting. And if need be, we can have a special meeting in June. I hope we don't get to that. I hope we can come to an agreement. So is there anything else we need to discuss?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
Uh-oh,
if I may, just request of the
gonna make
board,
$1 million donation.
before we close on the public hearing is closed, as I understand.
Yes.
But we're still talking about the budget proposed. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so at the onset, I talked about two of the goals that we had this evening. And that was to provide the board of directors with information regarding the proposed budget. I think we succeeded that. We had a great discussion this evening, and thank you for that. To help you make informed decisions and recommendations, underscore recommendations. We've also completed and conducted the required public hearing for the budget. So that's done in the books. At the conclusion of tonight's proposed budget discussion, staff would like to have clear direction from the board of directors on any modifications for the proposed budget. So in other words, in order for us to return for a prepared budget for the May board meeting in the next 30 days, we need to be very clear, staff needs to be very clear on what direction the board is giving us so that we can make any modifications, run the values, run the rate tables. I don't know if that means going back to the finance committee for discussion, Mr. Chair. Obviously, we're open to that as well. So I just wanted to underscore that if we need some concrete items from the board as far as moving forward here so that we know what to prepare.
And there again, we get down to who's going to propose cuts where. What cuts are going to be proposed. And we have to have agreement of the board on those cuts.
I would like to consider the annual increase at 2% rather than 3%. Only due to the fact that we're giving 2 more weeks pay. I don't know how much that'll affect, but that's one suggestion that I would like to make.
And let's make clear what your suggestion is related to
The 3% annual increase.
3% annual increase.
That's the 3% that I asked about. She was cut that down to 2%.
And you want to reduce it to 2%.
Only because of the extra 2 weeks pay that has been done.
Okay. And we're trying to find, what is it, 1.15 million in savings. Richard, do you have a figure off the top of your head about how much that would save us?
I'm sure.
I know I'm asking a lot.
I'm sure he does.
If I know Richard, he knows
He
all
already
the
knows.
percentages by now.
I have charts and things for everything. Because I don't want to get everyone on the board to be totally surprised. And I'm not going to give you a number off the top of my head. If I don't have a chart for it, you won't get it till next time. So I'll give you a breakdown of the cost built into the proposed budget for pay. And I'll go ahead and just not give you the COLA, but the merit and so forth. So based on the base pay with the new positions as we've got in the proposed budget, the 3% COLA in total is estimated to cost just under 92,000. Let's say 92,000 even. So if you cut that to 2, that theoretically will save you about 30,000.
Yeah. The
merit at 4%, if you budget it for full 4%, that's worth about 126,000. And then, of course, the 401k, if you assume 100% participation, which we know is not the case, we're more at the 40-45% participation range. All 3% of that only costs you about 105,000. Those are the pay related.
The only other thing I have is, when are we going to have a actual number on the medical premium?
Well, that's a tricky question. So built into the proposed budget, that's a good question, as we talked about in the finance committee meeting right now, built into the proposed, the board, I believe, asked the HR manager and executive director to take a poll of existing employees and see how many would participate. We used that poll to put in the proposed budget. There's 2 projected to participate if it's an act.
No, I'm talking about the projected increase of 15% of medical premiums. When are we going to know how much that actual number is? Is it going to be 15%? Is it going to be less? It was 10% last year, 15 more this year is a 25% increase over
Right.
one calendar year.
So that's just kind of what they give us as a worst case scenario. We should know by the end of the month.
Okay,
Well, end of April is like
is it
a
open
starting
enrollment?
number, yes, but until June 30th, I mean, really to the last day when we're doing open enrollment, you really don't know. There's a lot of factors that go into deciding what the rates will be, age.
The
number of
rates are
employees.
based on enrollment?
Well, we're under 50 employees,
Right.
so ours are not based on past medical issues or anything like that. It's
Won't these
it's
three,
based
won't these
specifically
three
on
hit
ages.
50? With these three new employees, won't that bring us up to 50?
No,
I thought we were at 40.
It was +2 is the ad.
Right.
+2, it's still less than 50.
yeah,
So an open enrollment means employees can choose different coverages. So our
Right.
census right now has them in category A. Some might go to category B, and there's a different cost associated with that during open enrollment. But yeah, it's typically this time of year, towards the end of April, we start to get those costs dialed in for our upcoming year. So when we say projected, could be less than the 15%, plus we haven't run 100% of our employees as far as, because we always have some vacancies. We budget for the worst case scenario. It usually comes in lower, but those numbers will start to come into focus for us here over the next 30 days, basically, right? For us.
Okay.
15%.
Well, that might
The
help.
worst case scenario.
Mhm.
Always tell them, give me the worst. Help us prepare for the best.
Okay.
Thank you, Priscilla.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
How you doing?
Yeah, I am. Go ahead.
So I've been quiet tonight.
Yes, you have.
You have been. We didn't
So,
know you were here.
I think the finance committee and the group staff, but it's doing the yeoman's work on this budget. And I think that what we're trying to do as far as the schedule adjustments for wages and the slight increases in that, goodwill goes a long way, especially when we're talking about 30 grand. Changing from a 2% to a 3% and that type of thing. The
92,000.
cut, right, the 30 grand going
30
from
grand.
3 to 2.
You're only saving 30,000 by
30,000.
cutting 1%.
To try and put these little scalpel corrections into the budget. I know nobody wants a rate increase, but we're gonna need a rate increase. It is just the nature of the beast. We are at this point in time in our economy. Prices of everything is going up. Wages are relatively stagnant. Interest rates are higher. It's the cost of doing business. Unfortunately, it is what it is. We're not throwing on additional things and lavish spending on this. I mean, SGWASA produces water at within acceptable limits for our state and federal guidelines, and that goalpost changes from time to time. And we have to react by spending money on whatever we're spending money, whether it be a sewer plant upgrade or when we took the THHM issue out of our water a couple years ago with the $14 million upgrade, we're reacting. The PFAS is coming. We know it's coming. We're trying to stay ahead of it as best we can. People accuse us of not being fast enough, but we're reacting in I think real time. And his budget is fine the way it is, and we can spend all night trying to tweak it and save $50, but I don't think it's going to happen.
I don't see us finding $1,150,000.
No, I don't either.
I've went through it myself, and I had a lot of conversations with a lot of people prior to coming to this meeting. And there's no way by looking at this budget, you'll find that amount of money.
Right.
Absolutely. I agree with you. We can sit here all night and bounce things around, and we may save a few dollars here and there,
But it's not enough to share.
No.
No,
not enough to make a substantial change.
no, $1 million.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, on the consumer end, strict conservation measures on your own family is probably limiting shower times. And you're gonna get pinged in the public for saying this, but that's where you control your costs. This water is very, very expensive. Very expensive water,
Unless you
but
have a
it
teenager.
is where we reside, and to compare us to other places, the factors, location on the ground is where we are, and this is the price of what it costs to live here.
So
We're not
in Cary, we're not in Chapel Hill. We don't want to be in those places. We're here in Butler Creek or STEM, Granville County. And so the price is what it is to live here. But I don't care what the price is in Hillsborough. This Granville County is not a Hillsborough. Okay, so this is what it is.
In 2002, I paid the rates in Hillsborough. And I had water only and was paying in the $70 to $80 per month range for water only in 2002 in Hillsborough. I had neighbors who had water and sewer that were paying in $150 range. Mind you, this is 2002. This is 22 years ago. So the rates here didn't shock me when I moved here. It's certainly not what I wanted to pay. It's not what I paid when I was in Durham. But it's not the highest rates in the state. And there again, we don't have any subsidies anywhere. We can't subsidize with taxes. So what we've got is what we've got. And we have a good amount of debt, and we discussed it earlier that we're paying $500,000 a year to Butner, the town of Butner. But that could have easily been $750,000 a year because in the beginning, when SGWASA was formed,
Yeah.
they were paying the state $750,000 a year.
Mhm.
And thanks to Tom Lane and Edgar Smoke,
Yeah.
that were part of the Butner Citizens Association at that time, they said, we think that the town can survive on a $500,000 subsidy for
Right.
the police and fire, which that's what the $750,000 funding to the state was going for at that time.
Yeah.
Fast forward, we set it up, set the rates up. Mount Hope Finishing Company pulls out. They're doing 100,000 gallons a day in water and sewer. 6 months after SGWASA was formed, they lost the revenue for 100,000 gallons a day, water and sewer. You had the Falls Lake rules come in,
Oh, Lord.
had to spend 27 million for a sewer plant. We're still paying on that. You got a good many years left to pay on it. And we got no funding for it. We got no grants, we did manage to get some low interest loans. Then we bought the Creedmoor system, and that was another 15 million added on to our debt. And we're still paying on that.
It's a Cadillac system.
Yeah. Yeah, and we're still paying on that. We had the money set aside for the water plant upgrade, and we paid most of that. I think we financed a little bit of it, but we paid all of it. Okay,
All of it, yeah.
all of it came out of our fund balance.
Thank
So
you.
that was a big hit to our fund balance, but we avoided another payment.
Mhm.
And now we're going to end up with another payment when we complete this I-85 project. And if the economy holds up and the builders come back that were already interested in building, we'll be in great shape. If the economy tanks, I don't have an answer. Because none of us have an answer what may happen if the economy tanks. So there's a lot of factors there that we can't control. But I think we're doing a good job of what we have to work with. And there again, none of us want this increase,
No.
but I just don't see a way to avoid it. It's anybody else got any comments?
Yeah, make sure you vote. That's all I got to say.
I think to the director's point, if you need it as a motion, I think I'm good to have this budget come back as it is at the next meeting.
Okay, any objections from any of the board members?
No, I think I agree with Tim, just to
Okay.
come back with it, because we've discussed trying to, as Tim said, we tried to nickel and dime and find something, but we're not gonna have anything that calculates up to $1 million. I wish we could. be able to say that we didn't have to go up, but realistically, it's not gonna work out. I think we'll be sorry later if we didn't go up on the rates.
Anybody else? If we have no further comments, then we'll go to our comments from our executive director.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, board members. So as I understand, we'll move forward with the proposed budget as is without any changes and bring that forward to the board at May for further discussion. That's where we sit. So that'll be an item on the agenda for May. Thank you very much. Nothing further. I think I've talked enough this evening, but just again, want to say thanks to my team members that helped me put this budget together, including our finance director, our assistant finance director, our HR manager, our PIO, and our superintendent. So thank you very much to all of them. I greatly appreciate your help. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any comments from our attorney?
I have a matter for executive session,
Okay,
possible litigation.
all right. And comments from our board members? Councilperson Vicky Daniels.
I was just gonna say, thank you all for coming tonight. It's nice to have people out in audits and actually be here in real time and hear our meetings. And know that we thinking, putting you first. We try to do what's best for our customer base. And I want to thank the staff and the finance committee for working very hard on this budget. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Wade,
No comment.
no comments. Commissioner McLeod.
Thank you for everyone coming. And when I walked in this evening, I was set totally against any kind of rate hike. But after looking through this, there's no way to change what's been before us. Have a good evening.
Commissioner Karen.
I reserve my comments not to fan the flame.
Mayor Jordan.
Again, I just want to publicly thank our director Shura and the staff for the work and efforts they put into preparing the budget. And you know, it's not an easy decision. I mean, it's unfortunate that we do have to do a minimal rate increase, but I think, you know, doing it now will help us in the long run because we don't want to get behind. Because I know when PFAS comes, it's going to come with a vengeance, and we're going to have to do some things really quickly. And so we just need to be prepared for that and hope for the best that things will level out throughout the next upcoming years. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem and Vice Chair Kaczynski.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody for coming. Lynn, thank you for your comments and your understanding. I want to thank the staff, and in no way do I want you to think that I was minimizing anybody's work at SGWASA. You guys do a phenomenal job. I was just trying to find a way to find it somewhere else. It has no reflection. We've got a great staff at all levels and a great executive director leading us. I wanted to say that there's been a lot of water quality comments on social media lately. I have not seen them. People have been sending them to me because they want to make sure that I do see them. Our water quality has passed, as Commissioner Karen said, has passed state and federal standards for over 7 years that I'm aware of, and never ever failed in the last 7 years that I've been aware of. And the only option for people who want, I don't know what people want from us to make the water quality in or better than it is what it is. There's no option except to sell the water plant and let the people in the southern end of Granville County find their own source of water. That's not going to happen because we're not going to let the people in the southern end of the county go without water. We've done everything we can do. We have worked all very hard, not only on this budget, but on everyday matters. We know that PFAS is coming. We don't know how much it's going to cost. And I don't know what's going to happen next. We We're outgrowing this building with all the work and the staff we have. And that's another thing that's coming down the pike. Then we've got copper and lead, which we've been lucky for 4 years. We haven't had to enact that one yet. But all these things cost money, and they cost a lot of money. And we've got great county commissioners in place right now and great board members here that fight every day to try and find grants so that we don't have to reflect these prices on our customers. But I believe that once we finish the I-85 project and growth starts, that we are going to see a leveling off. That's just my opinion, that it's going to level off. Our debt service will level back up, and hopefully we will have funding for some of these projects, and we will get funding for some of these projects from outside sources without picking the pockets of our customers. And I hope you all understand that we are doing the best that we can, and none of us want to do this at all as far as raising rates. We don't want to do it at all.
Thank you. And to kind of piggyback on what you were talking about, the complaints on social media about water quality. I made this offer on social media several years ago that anybody that's having a problem with water quality or anything with their water, I would be glad to make arrangements with the executive director and set up a time with the customer to come out and have them show us what the problem is so that we can actually see it. And also we could probably have an engineer look around and find the source of their problem. Unfortunately, I had one person to accept that offer. And then when I tried to nail down a time, they ghosted me. They just, cut off all communication. So, we've got some critics on social media that exploit certain things, and, they're slowly running into the ground. As for tonight, I guess we've had a example of making sausage here. We've ground things down. We have really ground it down, and none of us are in favor of a rate increase. But we also have to face the facts, and it's just like Commissioner McLam said. He come here, prepared to vote against a budget, and we still haven't voted for it yet. We given the executive director clear direction of where we have to go. And it's just a fact of life. It's a fact of low growth, inflation. Those two don't match. If you don't have inflation and you have low growth or no growth, you can survive, but you can't survive with inflation. So that's just a matter of economics. It's nothing else we can do. And with that, that concludes my comments. Is there any other business to come before us tonight? Does anyone else have anything? Then we will entertain a motion to go into closed session.
Make a motion to go into closed session.
Second.
We have a motion, a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're going to take a 5 or 10 minute break here to.
Make a motion. Close.
Okay, we have a motion to adjourn and a
There's an awful
second.
lot of seconds coming down there.
Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed likewise. Ayes have it. Motion carries. Good night, everyone. Good night.
Right.